If you're meeting me for the first time, my name is Madam Ugo, your unconventional online French tutor. In today's tutorial, we are going to be talking about Passé Composé, which is the grammar you use in French if you want to talk about past tense expression. So please like, follow, share, and participate in what we are doing here today. To kick off this tutorial on Passé Composé, simply put, Passé Composé is your past tense expression. In the previous video, we have learned the present tense and how to make our conjugation in the present tense. Now we are going to learn our conjugation in the past tense. I would like to start by saying that if you really want to know your Passé Composé very well, there are two things you need to keep in mind. One, there are two classes of verbs in French that we call auxiliary verbs. So these auxiliary verbs act like a helper that is needed in order to help you to conjugate your verbs in French in the past tense expression. Liken it to be like an auxiliary gear in a car where you need, especially in an SUV, where when you are moving through a tough terrain or a rough terrain and you want your auxiliary gear to help you to be able to navigate that rough terrain. That is exactly the role that auxiliary verbs in French play when you're making your verb conjugation in the past tense expression. Now, there are two known auxiliary verbs, which are avoir, the verb to have, and être, which is the verb to be. The next thing is to learn the verbs that would use avoir as their auxiliary verb and the verbs that will use être as their auxiliary verb. That will take me to the next thing that I want to say. Most French textbooks will tell you that action verbs would usually use avoir in their conjugation in past tense expression. I don't like to express it that way. Rather, what I can tell you is that many of our first group verbs, which are also known as verbs, they use avoir as their auxiliary verbs. And we also have second group verbs. Most second group verbs, in fact, 100% of second group verbs in French use avoir as their auxiliary verb. While we have another class of verbs called pronominal verbs or reflexive verbs, okay? They use être in the conjugation of passé composé. And when we get to the ones that use être, we are going to be talking about a very popular acronym known as Dr. Mrs. Von der Trump. This will help you to remember all of the verbs that would use être in their conjugation. Back to first group verb conjugation using avoir as auxiliary verb. Let's start with the verb manger, which means to eat. I am going to draw a table here. On my left is going to be the present tense and on the right is going to be the past tense. In the present tense, if I want to say I eat or I am eating, I will say je mange. While in the past tense, which is passé composé, if I want to say I ate or I have eaten, I will say j'ai mangé. You will see here that the auxiliary verb avoir is already here. So when you say j'ai mangé, what you are typically saying is I ate. It is also the same thing as saying I have eaten. Then we have present tense, if you're using to mange. In the past tense, I will say tu as mangé, which means you ate or you have eaten. To mange, present tense, he eats or he is eating. In the past tense, I will say il a mangé, which means he ate or he has eaten. Present tense, I will say nous mangeons. Past tense, I will say nous avons mangé. Present tense, I will say vous mangez. Past tense, I will say vous avez mangé. Present tense, they are eating or they eat. I will say ils mangent. Past tense, I will say they have eaten or they ate. Ils ont mangé. There is also another thing I want to correct here. When you're asking students questions and you say, how do you conjugate a verb? Some students will say something like this. The passé composé of the verb is XYZ. please stop saying that if you are guilty. It is important to note that when you have a conjugated verb, for example, I have here, j'ai mangé. What you've got here is your avoir working as your auxiliary, and the next one you have is what we call the participle passé of the verb to eat, which is manger. The combination of the auxiliary verb plus the participle passé of the verb equals passé composé. We need to distinguish between what we call participle passé, what you call auxiliary verb, and how both of them come together to form your passé composé and use the right word to describe what you want to talk about. All right, let's quickly move to conjugation of our second group verb under passé composé. I am going to use the verb to finish, which is fini. In the passé composé, I will say things like this: I finished or I have finished. So I finished, j'ai fini. You finished or you have finished. Tu as fini. He finished or he has finished. Il a fini. We finished or we have finished. Nous avons fini. You finished or you have finished. Vous avez fini. They finished or they have finished. To recap, when we are conjugating our first group verbs, it is always important for you to note that the participle passé of your verb will always have accent on the E, which is the last spelling letter of your participle passé. While for your second group verbs, the last letter is always I for all second group verbs in French. And when it gets to your third group verb, you need to pay attention and be able to memorize and master the participle passé of your third group verb in passé composé. I'm going to use a typical example of the verb to see, which is voir. If I want to say I saw or I have seen, I will say j'ai vu. If I want to say you saw or you have seen, I will say tu as vu. If I want to say he saw or he has seen, I will say il a vu. If I want to say we saw or we have seen, I will say nous avons vu. And if I want to say you saw or you have seen under the formal setting or more than one person, I will say vous avez vu. And if I want to say they saw or they have seen, I will say ils ont vu. Now, remember that in our A1 that we learned that third group verbs usually would have IR or RE as their ending. Here is a typical example of a third group verb that uses avoir. And this last spelling letter under the infinitive is IR. I will use another example of a third group verb that its last spelling letter is RE. So a typical example of that would be the verb to take, which is prendre. So I took or I have taken will be pris. You took or you have taken will be tu as pris. He took or he has taken will be il a pris. We took or we have taken will be nous avons pris. You took or you have taken will be vous avez pris. They took or they have taken will be ils ont pris. You can see that when it came to a third group verb that uses RE as its last spelling letter, when it came to the participle passé of the verb, we can see that it changes. So if I use another verb, say dire, for example, or I use a verb like faire, you will see that the participle passé of the verb is not going to have a definite pattern, just like we saw with first group verb and second group verb that had E and I respectively. So now let's make some sentences using example of first group verb, second group verb, and third group verb in past tense expressions. Example 1. I want to say she ate the food this morning. So she ate the food this morning is going to be elle a mangé pas ce matin. She ate the food this morning. I want to say we have finished the task. So we have finished the task will be nous avons fini la tâche. We have finished the task. And I want to say they took the object from the bag. So they took the object from the bag will be nous ont pris l'objet du sac. This is how you make your sentences using your verbs in the Passé Composé, which is otherwise what we call the past tense expression. I hope you've been able to learn how to conjugate your verbs in the past tense, and I want you to give me more examples of verbs using the following verbs. Indiquer, which means to indicate, which means to choose, and the verb faire, which means to make or to do in the past tense. Let me see your examples in the comment section, and I hope you've been able to learn. Also invite your friends to follow and also watch our videos and join you in learning the French language together. I hope to see you next time in my next video. Bye for now until we catch again. See you.